Dude, these are rock hard. These are rock hard.
Try the second level.
He gave us stale croissants.
They're not stale.
They're stale.
Linda had them in the fridge. Not stale. They're hard.
That's not a sound a croissant's supposed to make.
Okay, well, next time you bring goodies.
All right.
This is the AT Banter Podcast, a balanced and entertaining look at assistive technology, accessibility, and its importance in people's lives. Join Rob Minot, Ryan Fleury, and Steve Barclay as they banter with people around the world about anything and everything regarding assistive technology and the disability community. Now, on with the show.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
You notice I gave that pregnant pause there? Dramatic pause. We're getting good at this podcasting thing.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, we're 130 plus episodes in now.
Well, you'd think we'd have figured something out by now.
Taking it to the next level. My name is Rob Minot. See, taking it to the next level, and I forgot to do introductions.
Really?
Yeah, our first two shows of the year, I did notice that. I completely forgot to do introductions. We just went straight into things. No one knew who the hell we were, I'm sure. We're out of practice. No, my name is Rob Minot, and joining me today, Mr. Ryan Fleury.
Howdy.
And Mr. Steve Barclay.
Good day, eh?
And, yeah, here we are on a fine, chilly but beautiful Vancouver sunny morning.
Yeah. Let's get this over with so we can get back out there.
Mm-hmm. How was your weekend?
Short.
Okay. Thanks. Excellent. All right. That's small talk over. I hope no one wanted any banter in the
AT Banter now with 50% less banter.
That's right.
That's right. It's our new jingle.
It's the Diet Banter program.
We'll have to work on that jingle. AT Banter now with 50% less banter. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve, I'm busy the rest of the day.
Okie dokie.
All right. Well, I guess if that's all we have for banter, then let's just get straight to some news.
Yeah, so this is the story that I sent out, I think yesterday, about a
This is terrible.
senior who was beaten up while taking transit for the elderly and disabled in, is it Ottawa?
I think it's Montreal.
Montreal?
Oh man, there's a picture of her. Yeah. She's
really?
Not
She got hammered. She was basically a 92-year-old woman taking, accessible transit service.
So is that like the handy darts that we have here in Vancouver?
Yeah, exactly. So she gets on, and the bus driver tells her not to talk to the guy beside her.
Okay.
I guess he had a history. So she sat down, and she wasn't talking to the guy beside her, and he just jumped her and started beating the crap out of her.
Now, what do they know about the guy that did this?
I mean, obviously he's got issues, but I know he wasn't charged because he has some sort of intellectual disability. They knew that this guy was a problem. They knew that he was potentially violent. What on earth was he doing on that service in the first place?
Yeah, no kidding.
There should be, certain things that preclude you being able to use a service like that, and the likelihood of jumping a 92-year-old and beating the tar out of her is probably one of those things that should probably strike you off the list.
Yep.
Well, you would think so. I mean, and obviously, the driver did specifically tell her that he was dangerous. Yet, he sat her beside him all the same.
Yeah.
Did the driver try to intervene at all? Or was he just...
I'm sure it doesn't really say, but I mean, I'm sure he obviously did something, but I mean, at the same time, he's got to stop the bus and pull over, and then, by then it's too late, I'm sure. I don't know. What do you do as a transit service when you have somebody who is eligible for the service, but yet is maybe deemed, quote, dangerous?
Put him in a cab.
That, or if you know you're going to be doing a pickup for somebody like that, you have a security guard on.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
You know, because the driver, like you say, isn't going to have time to, you know, stop, pull over, intervene. He may be too busy. So
yeah, but clearly that passenger should be traveling alone.
Yes. Yeah.
Not with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the problem at the core of this is that they have limited funds.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily realistic for them to make completely separate runs for certain people and you know, than others. I mean, at some point, right? Am I right? Or you're looking at me like I might be crazy?
I think you're crazy.
Really? Okay.
I think
Well,
for somebody like this, absolutely, it should be a separate run.
Well, I think so. I think so. But at the same time, like, how do you juggle that? You know, given the budget that we've given them.
It's got to fit within the budget. I mean, it's got to be done from a safety first perspective. You know, he could have killed this lady.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I know it'd be a completely different conversation that we'd be having.
Yeah. Well, they were actually in a cab. Sorry, not a bus.
The drivers aren't really trained in terms of how to deal with aggressive or violent passengers. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are going to be rare. But I mean, when you're dealing with people with developmental disabilities, you know, there has to be some training involved.
There should be.
For the drivers.
There absolutely should be.
These drivers are essentially caretakers for the length of that drive.
Yeah.
And they need to be trained accordingly.
Well, I mean, you've got to ask, is it even appropriate to put this guy into a taxi when you know that the driver's untrained?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
That transit commission is really doing some inappropriate things.
Yeah.
Okay, but we've also seen reports of our own transit service who gets maybe 15, 20 minutes of, you know, disability talk, and then boom, they're out in the bus in the public working with people with disabilities.
Yeah.
They're not being trained either.
No, it's
This
true.
could happen anywhere.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it could.
Well, and you think about, you know, if anybody starts to have any sort of an issue during that drive, whether it's a medical issue, it's a medical emergency, it's a seizure, it's who knows. I mean, you know, there's a lot of people that are going to fit in that disability category that are going to be using these services. There has to be some sort of training on site.
Well,
and
then,
the drivers are just like anybody else who's you know, in that you know, who's in a caretaker position, even though it's only for the length of the drive. That's who's on site, and then they need the training. You know, in this particular situation, had the driver had training, I don't know if it would have done any good. I mean, you can't necessarily look at somebody and just know that they're going to actually do this. I mean, I think that in this particular situation, obviously the solution would have been for these two people not to be in the cab together. This guy should have been riding solo, and that's it. And, you know, again, this is where the budget concerns come up with, because then you have to do a completely separate run just for this guy. But, you know, I think Steve's right. I think that in cases like this, that's the only solution. Budget be damned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is it's a public service. So the public is paying for this through taxes. So's the medical system in Quebec. Yep. So it just came out of a different part of the budget when things went sideways.
Right.
So, yeah. So take that money and put it into the transit system so that people can actually be safe.
Well, and it just makes you wonder, like, I don't know, how often do things like this happen that we don't actually even end up hearing about? Like the fact that this woman was beaten so badly and that she was, you know, she's 92. So he could have easily killed her.
Yeah.
The fact that she's sort of recovering okay, she, you know, it's a couple weeks out from the sounds of it, and she's, you know, improved quite a bit. But I mean, how often does this happen on a regular basis in transit systems across the country?
Well, we only hear about it in the most extreme cases. You know, there was the guy out in Saskatchewan who cut off somebody's head with a samurai sword on a Greyhound bus.
Oh, geez.
You know, that was a number of years ago.
I remember that.
Yeah.
That was terrible.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But we, even here locally, we hear on our news, I won't say every month, but quite frequently about, people verbally attacking other people on the trains, and there's been physical altercations as well. So
yeah,
this is happening in everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Training, caution, common sense.
Love your neighbor.
Okay.
Be kind.
All right, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Disney.
What about Disney?
So yeah, Disney has partnered with a company in Windsor, Ontario, to produce activity books for the blind.
Yay! Go Disney.
Go Windsor. Soon, children with visual impairments across North America will get to see what Mickey Mouse looks like, thanks to the efforts of a couple in Windsor.
Wait, scroll up to the picture again. I know these guys.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. I've been at trade shows with them before.
Rebecca and Emmanuel Blevolt.
Let's go with that.
Apologies if I've butchered that. They run a company called Tactile Vision Graphics in Windsor. They create greeting cards, maps, coloring books, and other publications in Braille for the visually impaired. And from the sounds of it, Steve, you've had run-ins with these guys? So they've been around for quite a while?
Yeah, they've been around for a number of years. I don't remember the last time I ran into them at a show. I'm trying to remember what show it was at that I ran into them at. But I seem to recall I sold them a charger for something. It was a long time ago.
So it looks like they approached the Disney company about 4 years ago about producing a series of activity books for children based on Disney characters, and it is now, the agreement has been signed, and they're currently designing the first book.
So does it go into details about what the activity book's like going to let you do? Is it just a coloring book? Is it?
Well, it's a tactile picture book, so all the edges, of course, will be raised, right? There's tactile graphics, but what really kind of shocks me is that this seems to be the first Disney book that's been done this way. But like, tactile graphics has been a thing for a long time, correct, Steve?
Oh yeah.
It's not a new concept at all.
Nope.
And in fact is used quite a bit in the education realm.
Yes.
Diagrams. If you think about diagrams and you think about charts.
Yeah, I mean, realistically,
Maps.
this isn't the first time that a Disney book's been adapted with tactile graphics, I'm sure.
But it's probably the first time it's been licensed.
Officially, yes, licensed.
Exactly.
Licensed, sure. But again, it's an important story because Disney's obviously a huge company, and the fact that they're taking this step into making a product that's specifically accessible for their customers, it's important. It's an important step for sure.
Yeah, and it's a great step for this company too, because
no
the
kidding.
the potential market for that stuff is
Off the charts.
Yeah, it's enormous.
They're I mean.
Well, the next time you go to, make a proposal to another company and say, look, we got Disney in our portfolio,
Yeah.
Company B is going to go, well, where do I sign?
Well, it says here they've got the license to publish materials for all of North America,
Right.
which they estimate is a market of about 700,000 people, and 10 times that in the U.S.
Yeah. Wow.
700,000 in Canada. What is that? What's 10 times 700?
You really did flunk math, didn't you? That would be about 7 million.
Yeah, look at that. That's huge. That's huge for them. So good for them. But also good for Disney. I mean, I think this is great news. This is
Well, two things spring to mind. One, if they have access to all Disney titles, does that include Marvel?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know.
Yeah, tactile comic books. Anyways,
Yeah.
The what was the other thing I was thinking about? Oh yeah, the other thing I was thinking about was Netflix had a very similar deal to this with Disney. They had all their titles, and then Disney pulled it and started their own. So maybe 2-3 years down the road, these guys are going to have the rights yanked out from under them, and Disney will start their own tactile graphics department.
You never know. Listen, if it becomes lucrative enough, I'm sure they will. But the interesting part about the development of this is that I would think that The activity book itself wouldn't be that complicated to actually make, especially given that really all you need to produce tactile graphics is just a specialized printer, right? And the right type of paper.
No, I think it depends on
Or do you think
what it is they're doing. Are they doing line drawings? Are they doing, raised drawings?
Yeah, it's hard to know unless
What
you're looking at a
technology they're
specific
using.
book and what their plans are for it. But yeah, no, I think a lot of what those guys do is probably quite manual,
right?
Because you would have to approach everything page by page.
So do you think it would be like Swell Touch or Braille Tactile?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
tough to
well,
say.
I'll get them on the show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we can ask them that if we can get them on the show.
Yeah.
But I don't know. They're going to be busy. That's
They'll be hiring.
yeah. I mean, that must be great for them. I
Oh,
mean,
for
it
sure.
sounds like they were just a small, ma and pa operation, husband and wife
Yep.
company. That's a huge get to get Disney. Like, look at this. This looks like our old office. Look at that. They got like a microwave and like a little beer fridge there. That's probably their lunchroom that she's working at. Like concrete. It's probably in the back of a warehouse somewhere.
Yep.
Steve, why didn't you get us Disney? Go get us Disney.
All right.
Hey, Steve, why don't you tell the fine folks about Canadian assistive technology?
Well, Canadian Assistive Technology is a Canadian-based distributor of, guess what? Assistive technology.
I would not have guessed that.
Really? Oh, I got to work something better into the name then. And we do all kinds of low vision and blindness aids, as well as all kinds of physical access aids and accessible furniture. You name it. Visit our website at www.canastech.com.
Rick, let me ask you about this. Chaos Technical Services.
Chaos Technical Services.
Don't sound so excited about it. Woo! Speaking of repairs.
We are the sister company to Canas Tech. We do the repairs on low vision devices, reading machines, for libraries, braille printers, and pretty well anything in between. We can be found at www.chaostechnicalservices.com.
Joining us today is Ted Drake, the Principal Engineer of Accessibility at Intuit. Good morning, Mr. Drake.
Hey there, this is Ted.
Hey, Ted. This is Ryan. All right. So, Ted, joining us today in the room here is Mr. Barclay.
Hello there.
Hello.
First name, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's...
And we have Mr. Banter over here, Mr. Rob Minot.
Hello.
Hello.
It's Monday. I think Rob's kind of
Stunned.
edgy, itchy.
Am I? What? Why?
He seems a little, I don't know, get up and go-ish this morning.
I am? I'm always Mr. Business. I don't know what you're talking about. Got to keep these guys in line, let me tell you.
Yeah.
I typically listen to you guys at 1.5 speed.
That's
How slow you would sound, It's like when someone has a screen reader and you ask them to turn down the speed, it sounds funky.
Yep.
Hey, I got a question for you. I was looking at one of your videos. It was a promotion for the assistive technology company. And someone was messing with a theremin or something like that. Was that actually a theremin I saw? It looked like a flat device with 3 panels sticking up in the air. And
Oh no, that's a Beams.
Oh, right. The beams, yes.
Yeah.
It's a music therapy device.
it is a music therapy, so it is acting similar to.
Not really, because it's got 4 lasers on it. When you break the lasers, it'll play whatever sound you've got assigned to it.
Okay.
But it doesn't have the variation that a theremin has.
We have a park in Palo Alto, and it has an archway with lasers, and as you walk through the archway, it plays tones.
Wow.
But the tones are set up so they're also randomized. So every day you go there and you do the same dance maneuver, it's going to sound slightly different.
Cool.
Cool.
Road trip.
Okay, well, being Mr. Business, I guess I better get this party started. So
yeah,
officially.
come on.
So,
Mr. Podcast.
He's a podcaster.
Everybody's
this week?
a Mister this morning. I don't know what happened. We came into the studio. Ryan's got his chocolate croissants here, which never happens, and he's calling everybody Mister. So, I'm not really sure if an alien has inhabited Ryan's body or something. I'm not sure what's going on, but. Listen, and hey, in any case, thanks so much for taking some time and joining us today.
Sure, you're welcome. I'm excited to do it.
Well, listen, why don't we start out telling us a little bit about a little background about Intuit, about the company in general, and just what type of products you guys are making, and then from there we'll dive into sort of the accessibility pool from there.
Okay. Intuit is a financial software, essentially, company. It started back in the days of DOS, 30 plus years ago. I can't remember. It was basically started by a husband and wife who were trying to balance their checkbooks. And it was a mess. And he thought there's got to be a better way. So he created a spreadsheet and then kept working on it until it became Quicken. That was the foundation for Intuit. Over the years, Intuit has expanded into QuickBooks for small businesses, Mint for personal finance, and TurboTax for publishing your tax returns. There's been a few other products off and on, but that's essentially what the business is. How do people file their taxes, and how do they run their businesses and understand their personal finances? One thing that kept Intuit separate from most companies is that there is an extreme focus on customers.
Right.
This started back in the days of Quicken, where they would hang out in software stores and they would watch people buy their product, and then they would go up to them and ask them if they could follow them home and watch them install the product.
That's not creepy at all.
But that helped them figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And that's sort of been the basis of how we do stuff into it. We're constantly working with customers. We don't build something and then find a customer. We find customers, find out what's difficult for them, and then find solutions for that. And that's how the products develop.
So now, in terms of accessibility, has the accessibility component of the software packages always been a very key component of the company?
I can't really speak for before I arrived at Intuit. I don't really know all of the history of it. Of course, it worked when it was DOS. And then Windows switched to Windows, and there were a lot of problems in the early days because we started building software before Microsoft had a true accessibility API.
Right.
We've had to work with that over the last few years, trying to solve old pages. And QuickBooks Desktop, with the help of my blind spot and DeQ, we've gotten that to the point now where QuickBooks Desktop is accessible. But we had to go back and modify code that hadn't been touched in 25 years. And then the online products has been a journey, up and down. That's how things go. We change stuff constantly. But I've been at Intuit for 7 years, and there's been some pretty dramatic improvements for accessibility. Well,
I'm sure. I mean, just given that Microsoft has taken some pretty huge steps in the past, I would say even 5 years in terms of accessibility. Have you found that developing for Windows has just improved dramatically over that time?
If I were building a brand new Windows product, yes. But when you're building a product that has 30 years of code, some new, some old, some middle, you're ending up with a mixture of code. And so you have to go back in and figure out, for this vintage of code, what's the best way of fixing it. New stuff, if you're building iOS, you're building Android, you're building Windows, and you're building with standard components, things are really easy.
So for all the new kids on the block, it's great. But for all you old guys, it's a little bit more challenging, I guess is what you're saying.
It is. It's challenging for desktop applications that are old. And they're old, not to say that we don't update them. We're constantly updating them. It's just that some of the foundations are old. But we've been able to work with QuickBooks Desktop. We've been able to work with JAWS scripting and then fixing the fundamental foundation of the product. The JAWS scripting helps that final mile where we have a button, we know what it is, we know the state, it's clickable, but we're not exactly sure what the label is. So the JAWS scripting helps with the labeling.
Right.
And so where is the accessibility level at now with some of the other applications like the QuickBooks Online, the app for smartphones, TurboTax?
Typically, our phone apps are really good because we use standard components for the most part. We don't we're accounting software, so we don't have spinners and widgets and strange game type functionality. So our phone apps typically work great. Some of the standouts are payroll, it's deductible, TurboTax, QuickBooks Self-Employed. And then the online, we're constantly working on online. Some of them work great, like TurboTax Online works really well. QuickBooks Online, we're constantly updating. I think we fixed about, I think in the last month, we fixed about 30 bugs for accessibility. But those could be small, those could be big, but we're constantly fixing that. We've also been working on how do you build a new platform for the future of QuickBooks and the future of Intuit. And that new platform was designed to be accessible from the very beginning. So the design, the engineering, the testing, and the integration are all accessible.
Yay, universal design. Yay.
Where does this focus on accessibility originate from? Like what is it in the company that's driving this accessibility push?
I have a unique position at Intuit in that I don't have to justify return on investment. It's not a financial thing. I've worked for other companies, and I know other people that work for companies where you have to say, if we invest this in accessibility, then we have these new openings. At Intuit, it goes back to the customer experience. So whenever I find an issue, I just show them how it's affecting the customer. That's the key thing.
Yeah, because I will say it seems fairly rare, especially for a software company that's that has sort of two main packages. There's not a lot of other software companies that would put the resources into accessibility that Intuit does. So yeah, it's I mean, and that's really one of the reasons why that we wanted to talk to you specifically.
Well, and we use QuickBooks, so I have a list, Ted.
I hope you don't have any
offline, but offline, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's yeah. I hope your afternoon's clear.
QuickBooks Online is 100% accessible. There are areas where we need help, knowing what are the key pain points. And we work with a number of blind entrepreneurs that are constantly giving us feedback.
Well, Steve's the entrepreneur. I'm just his grunt.
It's Mr. Grunt to you.
That's right. Senior grunt.
That's right.
Just a loud grunt.
Yep.
Is it because really you guys are you have, it seems to me, 3 different platforms that you're developing on. You've got sort of a desktop package. You've got an online component that's an offshoot of that. And then you've got a completely mobile platform that you also develop for. Is that a real challenge for you guys, especially in terms of making sure that each of those components are accessible? And is any of those platforms sort of easier to juggle than the others in terms of accessibility?
I kind of look at it as 2 platforms, desktop and then online, mainly because desktop, you have a completely different production schedule. You have to worry about deadlines, a waterfall, you have to finish things, then it goes to CD, and then there's releases. Whereas online, we're constantly releasing, and the online component and the mobile components are very closely integrated.
Okay.
So with QuickBooks, you can go from the mobile phone to the online and back and forth, and the data is integrated. Same thing with TurboTax. Online is really easy because we use standard iOS and Android components. And those typically work out of the box.
Now, you talked a little bit about JAWS, like working with JAWS scripting languages and the software. And JAWS has definitely been a sort of a mainstay and a staple in terms of screen readers in the past. But these days, Microsoft Narrator has really made some leaps and bounds in terms of its usability. Have you found that from the development side? Have you found that you can do a little bit more with the software and Narrator than you had in the past?
I'd throw in NVDA in there as well.
Yeah, I would say that, to be honest, we don't test that often with Narrator. We test with NVDA and VoiceOver.
Okay.
And the reason why is that typically if it works in NVDA and VoiceOver, it usually works in JAWS and probably with Narrator. Whereas if you only test in JAWS, it's going to fix stuff that you didn't know was broken.
Fair enough.
But all of our developers are taught how to use VoiceOver because we all work on Macs. And then we have Windows machines available for testing. It's just Windows machines are a little bit difficult to run on a Mac, so we want them to know how to use the VoiceOver.
So as a blind user that I am using QuickBooks Online, what would be the best, I guess, solution or the best configuration? Is it JAWS and Chrome? Is it NVDA and Firefox?
Most people I know are using NVDA plus Chrome. The easiest is going to be the mobile app. However, it's not easy to type a lot in a mobile app.
Right.
So possibly NVDA plus Chrome might be your best. Chrome had a problem with data tables, but they've been working on that. Chrome with TalkBack, I should say, in Chromebox. Okay. And I think the data tables are working a lot better now.
So it seems to me that it's got to be a real challenge when you're developing because you've got so many balls in the air that you have to take note of. I mean, you have to know what Chrome is up to. You have to know what Firefox is up to. You have to know what JAWS is up to. All these different platforms, all these different browsers, and all these different operating systems. How do you manage all that?
That's why we're trying to standardize everything. We're trying to build components that work from the very start so that the developers don't have to think about it. They just know I need to use a select menu. Here's how I do it. And let's avoid having 50 different select menus. Let's just have one. And then we can concentrate on making that one accessible. So it goes back to trying to, if you're using a standard HTML select menu, it's going to work.
Right. Okay.
And that's where we're trying to go back to is how can we make it as standard as possible.
So thank God for industry standards.
Yeah.
And I mean, as developers, do you often do you sometimes be like, okay, great, we've got this working, and then 2 days later, Chrome comes out with a new version and breaks everything, and you're like, oh shit.
Yeah. There's definitely, and sometimes we got something working, and then there's a regression, and something's no longer working, so we have to go back saying, how did you break that?
And are the different browsers and Microsoft and everybody, are they fairly open with developers? Are the lines of communication really open? Like if you can just go to Firefox and be like, hey, this was working, now it's not. Can you tell us what you did?
They would be, for the most part. Apple is always kind of closed. You have to go to their Apple accessibility and mailing list. Chrome, I know the people at Google. Firefox, you've got Marco. Accessibility is a part of the industry that's open.
Right.
I could go over to Facebook, which is a few miles away, and talk to the team over at Facebook if I wanted. We don't hide stuff from each other. Everybody right. in the Bay Area, we're always sharing information and solutions. I was just talking to someone here at Intuit who's working on a data visualization using sound and haptic. And first thing I said was, I got to get you down to Yahoo to talk to them because they're doing something similar.
Now, getting a little bit off topic, because I was reading your bio and I was kind of fascinated with your bio, and I want to ask you a few things about that, because you've been in the accessibility field for quite a while. How did that all start?
I studied fine art in college, and I knew that when I graduated, I could probably get a job at a art store. So I started teaching myself web development. And then I got into the Museum of Art in San Diego, and the website manager left. So I said, hey, I can do this. And that's how I got into accessibility, is that working for a museum, you had to make it accessible.
Right.
This was back in the old days, and I was writing some really bad code. So I learned a lot, and then I moved on, and I got into standards-based web development, which was essentially saying, forget all the stuff that we were doing. Let's go back to the way it's supposed to be done. And that included a lot of accessibility. And so I just moved up and up, and I got a call from Yahoo, and I worked for Yahoo for 7 years as an engineer. And I helped co-found Yahoo's Accessibility Stakeholders Group, which was essentially a volunteer group of engineers working on accessibility across the company. And that eventually became the Yahoo Accessibility Lab, which became quite well known. And then I moved on from Yahoo to Intuit. For me, it was always a matter of how do you do it correctly? How do you have pride in your code? How do you make sure that you're doing the best job possible? And then seeing the impact of, building something and then watching somebody be able to check their bank account for the first time, or file their own taxes for the first time, run a business. I think that's why I like Intuit so much, is when we make something accessible, it has a significant impact on the user's life.
Well, and given that you've been in the field for so long, you have one of these unique perspectives that, the past 20 years has really been, the changes have been pretty significant.
Yeah, that's true. It's become, at least from a technology standpoint, it's become democratized. It's no longer expensive. You had an interview on recently with Iris Eye, and to build a virtual reality set 10 years ago would have been too expensive. Yep. But now you have companies that can quickly adopt technology that's inexpensive and start new companies. It reminded me of, when you were talking to him, it reminded me of when iPads came out and ProLakota Go came out with an augmented speech software.
Right, yeah.
Which was great, but it didn't solve the specific needs of many people. So then you had all of these people who had never programmed before that were building AAC apps for their child. And it was easy. You no longer had to learn a complex language. You could do stuff on a cheap device. I think Amazon's Fire tablet, where you can get a Android tablet for $50, and that is essentially a handheld assistive technology device.
Right. Well, even, we talk all the time, probably too much if you ask some of our audience, but we talk all the time about things like digital assistants. Mm-hmm. And for the very same reason. I mean, it's sure, it's a mainstream device. It's great. But at the same time, it is a relatively powerful piece of assistive technology if utilized correctly, and if the right developers develop for it. And smartphones, smart devices, they certainly did change the industry as well.
Well, also, one of the things I like about the home devices like the Google Mini is that we don't know what they're going to do. I look at the Apple Watch, and Apple Watch came out with the fault detection. Now, they probably were able to create that fault detection because they had so much data about movements.
Right.
Now, what happens if they're able to continue evaluating all that data, and they're able to come up with a way for the watch to detect if someone's got about to go into a diabetic shock?
Yep.
Or if someone has depression and they're about to go into something, who knows what we can learn from a heartbeat and movement, and then analyzed over millions of people. You'll have these devices that just keep getting better and better.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the Apple Watch is another great example of that. I mean, what really gets us excited, I think, well, maybe I shouldn't talk for these two guys because it could be completely different. But what gets me excited is when these mainstream devices come out, and people don't even realize what they have in terms of this is going to be an amazing platform for a piece of AT going forward. And all it really takes is the right developer to take that platform and to run with it. And I think the Apple Watch is another great example of that. When it first came out, it made a mild splash, but not much. People thought it was a gimmick. But for example, there's a company called Resound that develops a hearing aid for the Apple. Well, I guess I don't know if it's for the Apple Watch, but it will tie into the Apple Watch. Yeah. That's life-changing for a lot of people. It works amazing. And somebody on the street wouldn't have looked at an Apple Watch and thought, "Oh, hey, this would be perfect for a hearing aid app." So yeah, it's exciting.
I have a friend who he needed a hearing aid, but as many people that need hearing aids when they get older, they don't want to acknowledge it. So I showed him my AirPods. I took my AirPods off, let him wear them, and I turned on the remote microphone on my phone so he could try it out for the first time. And that afternoon, he went to the Apple store and bought some AirPods.
Yeah, right. So, it is an incredible time for AT right now, merely based on the technology that's coming out on a daily basis. And, especially, CES was just a few weeks ago, and some of the stuff that was announced out of that was pretty impressive. I mean, okay, yeah, the intelligent toilet's neat, but that's not going to change anybody's life. But for example, there was the announcement of the new HTC Vive VR goggles that now have eye tracking built into them.
Oh,
right.
Like the old Google Glass.
That's right. So that could have huge potential for AT, and because of course eye tracking has been a part of assistive technology for quite a while, with eye tracking systems and on-screen keyboards and such. But I mean, again, the manufacturers are sort of building that in order to combat motion sickness when people are gaming. But again, it has this huge potential for so much other stuff down the road. So
there's a conference that Intuit sponsors. We sponsor the Best Paper Awards for the Web for All conference. This is an annual conference for accessibility research. And the winner last year was a paper that showed they used eye tracking of search result pages. And they had an 88%, I think, was the success rate of detecting when someone had autism.
Really?
By looking at by eye tracking. So the way that this started was they wanted to see what barriers there were on the web for people with autism. So they had a control group. They looked at search result pages. They looked at people who have autism looking at their search result pages, and they came up with some ideas. Then they looked at that data and say, I wonder if we can reverse engineer this. Can we come up with patterns that say, can we differentiate between the people with autism and the control group? And they came up with the patterns. Then they ran it against another set of 20 people. And they were able to quickly detect which people had autism because they tend to scatter around the page. They don't look linear. They want to find something, but they get distracted with their eyes. So imagine having a virtual reality where you put on the goggles for a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, and to be able to get that early detection,
right?
Autism detection, to be able to say someone has autism is not an easy analysis. Yeah. It's expensive and time consuming. This could be great in India or Asia or Africa or communities that have 1 or 2 doctors in them. I'm a big fan of anonymous data. I kind of taught myself how to be an engineer, and a lot of that was by hacking with data that I could get online from different APIs. Couple things that I was thinking about, this was several years ago, I never built it, but you have maps and you know the location of a store. But how does a person that's blind know where the entrance is to the store? But if we had heat maps of people carrying phones, you could actually look at the outside of a building and know where the entrance was, because all those phones would be going into a single spot.
Right.
We did something at QuickBooks, which I think is really, really interesting. It's not available in Canada as far as I know, but it is available in the United States, is that we looked at the millions and millions of companies, and we came up with a credit score approach for how likely is a company to pay back a loan on time and effectively. And once we understood what are the factors of that, we then created something called QuickBooks Capital, where we provide low interest, small loans for short periods of time, and you only pay the market interest. There's no fees. And what we're finding is that the people that get these loans, I think it was something like 50% of them had never gotten a loan before. Because on paper, if they go into a bank, ask for a loan, they don't look like a safe bet for that bank. But when QuickBooks looks at it, we're able to see the combination of multiple factors in their account and say, yes, you do deserve a loan. And I think this is particularly important for people with disabilities, because it removes the unconscious biases and focuses on their company, their self-employment, and how likely are they to pay back those loans. And we've had a really, really good success rate with people paying back those loans. So it could be that you're going to an AT conference and you need to increase your inventory. So you get a $20,000 loan, buy that inventory, go to your AT conferences, and then you're able to pay back that loan in 3 months,
right?
Paying only the market interest. But that's something that's powered by big data that's anonymous. We're not looking at Joe Schmo. We're looking at a million different users.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I think that, in terms of, private citizen, I think anonymous data like that is excellent. I mean, I think that we need it. I think that in order to move forward, both medically and, genetically even, I know that there's, I don't know. I still kind of cringe a little bit with these DNA kits that you get sent, like Ancestry and stuff. I don't know if I would do that, to be honest.
I can tell you I've done a DNA analysis for health reasons, but not for Ancestry.
It just feels too, I just don't know who am I giving my skin cells to? I don't know.
It's true.
I don't want a clone popping up in 20 years.
Yeah, we don't want that either.
Oh, touche. Ryan just waiting for his opportunity the whole podcast.
I'm just thinking it's so arrogant. Jeez. Like, oh yeah, people are going to want to clone me the minute they get my DNA.
That's
right. I'm so sexy for it.
I'll leave that one alone.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I can just see him at Ancestry. Barclay. Oh, burn this one.
Burn it.
Well, I was just going to say, we know over the past year, Aira's been making inroads into airports, hotels, cities across America. And we have people in Canada who are explorers now using the service. And Aira's, been entering into the market, creating partnerships with different companies. And now Intuit seems to be a partner with Aira. So, Ted, can you explain a little bit about that partnership?
First off, I'll say that I first met Suman, the head of Aira, about 4 years ago. It was at an NFB conference, and he had just left Intuit. One of the things is that most of Aira's leadership is from Intuit.
Oh, really?
And engineers and stuff. He had just left Intuit, and Michael Hingson introduced me, and Suman was talking about this project he was working on. And to me, I thought, oh, this is like science fiction.
Right.
This is not going to work. But I watched the work that he was doing over the years, and it was getting to the point where I thought, okay, this is really one of the things I liked about Aira is it's not about the technology. And I noticed that from the very beginning, it was not about the glasses. It was about what they were doing in the back end. It was about the way that they were bringing people's data together. So if you were an explorer and you wanted them to have access to your Starbucks account or your email or your whatever you wanted them to have access to, they could use that information to better help someone. And Intuit changed their mission statement. I think it was in 2017. And our mission statement is powering prosperity around the globe. And this just seemed like the perfect opportunity for us to partnership with IRA, is to power prosperity. And what that means is we want people with people that are blind and have low vision to start businesses. If they already have businesses, we want you to be able to expand them, to hire more people, to become more prosperous, because as that happens, you're going to be able to hire more people. And as you hire more people, hopefully the unemployment rate is going to drop for people with disabilities. So we went to IRA, and IRA originally said we can do, a form of customer care. I said, we don't want customer care. That's why we made it open to any small business owner, any self-employed individual. You don't have to be using our products. You just need to be able to use IRA to help you complete the tasks that you need in order to run your business. So we're seeing people that are using it to sign PDF documents, to sort invoices, to check their inventory, to look at their clothing before they go for an interview. There are also people using it to use our products, and then hopefully we can get better feedback as to, this is a screen they were stuck on, and this is the help they needed to get past that screen. It's been really nice so far. We've had a great uptick in how people have used the IRA product in order to build their businesses.
So I did notice you had asked me to install the app and take a look at it to see if the promotional offer was here in Canada. And so when I installed the app this morning, under the promotions and business, like you mentioned, was the QuickBooks partnership. So what would kind of a call with IRA and, an Explorer using QuickBooks look like?
You can use the glasses, but you have to do it first with the app. So essentially, you would open up the app, you would choose the call IRA with free promotions. I can't remember the exact wording. That takes you to a screen with a bunch of different promotions. One of the promotions is for small businesses, and under products, there's one for QuickBooks. So if you're trying to use QuickBooks, it's better to use that one. It just gives us better, it helps us understand where there are. It's just two channels. It's anonymous data, but at least we know like X amount of minutes went to this and X amount of minutes went to that. But otherwise, you open it up, you start talking with an agent, and they help you do whatever you need to do. I'm not an IRA, obviously I'm not an IRA product person, so it's hard for me to describe the step-by-step. I've used it myself, but an IRA person can tell you how the initial interaction works.
Right, but an IRA agent wouldn't necessarily be trained on QuickBooks. They'd be able just to tell you kind of where you are on the screen.
Right,
so,
and that's all we want them to do.
Right.
IRA is meant to be a visual assistant.
Right.
They're not meant to be your accountant.
Right.
So you need to tell QuickBooks, I'm trying to do this, or I'm trying to, this is a task I need to complete. And the IRA people will help you complete that task.
Right.
But they're not QuickBooks customer support.
Right. And are there plans to expand that partnership to TurboTax?
There are plans we're working on. I've got a meeting next week with some of the people in TurboTax. TurboTax also has a product that we're launching this year called TurboTax Live. So it might get a little bit confusing, but TurboTax Live is where you're in the middle of your tax process and you have a question about a deduction or a form. And accountants will come on. They can look at your screen.
Oh, wow.
You can look at the accountant. You can talk to them. We've also tested this with one of my colleagues is deaf, and so she's done this to make sure that it works with the video relay service. That is an accountant helping you do your taxes.
Right.
If IRA worked with TurboTax, it would be more like, I need to take a picture of this W-2 form, or help me understand what this is or that is, but it would not be the same as our TurboTax Live product.
Right.
Sorry, now my mind is just reeling from the thought. I just had, while you guys were talking, I just had this idea of like, what happens when something like smart glasses just become ubiquitous across everything. Like it's just something that you wear on a daily basis. It takes it's the next evolution of, say, smart devices. Mm-hmm. Just think of all the different services on a daily basis that just everybody could, something like
Maps,
Ira,
music, GPS.
Except, it could literally be anything.
Directions.
Yeah, directions. You could just, if you're lost, you could just, call.
I think the movie Her does a pretty good job
of
thinking about that. I also like the idea of getting away from glasses. Think about your ear. You could have something like an AirPod that has a camera attached to it.
Oh.
The ear does just as good of a job as putting a camera in the middle of your eye or on the side of your face.
Especially for bald guys like us.
And then even Ira has like a little pouch so you can put your phone in a pouch and hang it from your neck, just like Google. What's that new Google thing coming up? I can't remember.
Lookout?
I want to say Duplex, but Duplex.
No, I think you're thinking of Lookout.
Lookout, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, look at one of the big pushback against the Google Glass was the fact that it just looked odd. Like when you wore it, it was just obvious that you're wearing some sort of a weird smart device. So I think you're right. I think that's probably the direction it will go. Is it'll be something that's very subtle, that it doesn't necessarily stick out like a front-facing camera in the middle of your forehead.
I think Instagram did a good job with their sunglasses. You don't even notice that they're got a camera on.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so the next 5 years, I think that there's definitely going to be an evolution of something. It's just a matter of what direction it's going to go. But I even think of travelers. Like how amazing would it be to be able to have a device like that on, and you'd never be lost even in a foreign city. Well, I mean, you're not now because there's stuff like Google Maps, but translation services.
Well, and some of the stuff, like you say, translation services is already there. Google Translate, Microsoft Translator. They'll translate on the fly, right? So.
But then we get into like stuff like sign language interpretation.
Yep.
Again, that's something accessibility problem that could certainly be solved with the existing technology. It's just a matter of putting it into the right package.
Yep.
I think sign language is one of the people have been trying to create sign language interpreters forever. I remember I was at an event in Romania when Yahoo used to host hackathons, and the Microsoft game that you would stand in front of, I can't remember the name of that gaming thing. Someone at that hackathon built a sign language interpreter.
That's right.
But the problem is sign language is so complex. It's not just fingers. It's not just hand movements. It's also the face. Yeah. And I would like to see something that incorporates video relay service more intelligently. Rather than trying to interpret the finger gestures, how do you get a video relay service to work seamlessly without having to hold your phone and look at it or something like that?
Yeah, well, there definitely are products. I think we talked about one or two on the show in the past few months.
There was a guy who was working on sign language translation using an Amazon show. I think it was.
Yes.
The Amazon Echo had a screen on it.
So I guess the camera uses a combination, I think, of the hand movements as well as trying to read the lips, and I think sort of uses both in order to come up with the best results. I'm sure it's not perfect, but it's certainly something that's being worked on, and yeah, I'm telling you, I keep saying this, but I'm going to say this every year. It's an exciting time for AT right now.
One of the challenges when I work with engineers that want to hack on something is I tell them to try coming up with a solution for short-term memory loss.
Yeah.
Because that's something that people don't think about very often. But it's a lot of times when we would engineer websites to work with a screen reader, because if you can work it for a screen reader, it works for a lot of different stuff. But I think if you come up with a solution that works for someone with short-term memory loss, it would also apply for many other people, because it's basically translations, it's reminding, it's task management. There's a lot of different aspects for it. So that's what I usually tell people to think about.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what that would look like. I've got a father-in-law with Parkinson's, and he's experiencing the dementia related to it. And along with that short-term memory loss, he asks the same question, 5 times in an hour.
Right.
And interesting. Just needs a little heads-up display that says, "You asked that already, Grandpa."
The good thing about Alexa and Siri and Cortana is that you can ask them the same question over and over and over and over.
And they don't get annoyed.
Yeah. By the way, has he tried the Lift spoon? Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
It's amazing. You can get it on Amazon, and it's part of Google. And it's a spoon that counteracts the shaking of the hand. So a person with Parkinson's can eat cereal without any kind of assistance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
and it keeps the spoon steady. They also have one for people with cerebral palsy who might have their arm in unusual angles, and it is able to keep the spoon level. But it's available on Amazon. It's not that expensive, and it's really, really good.
I'm looking right now.
It doesn't work for people that have unpredictable tremors, but for Parkinson's it worked. It was tested. It was actually built around, there was a Stanford student that was doing some work with Parkinson's patients.
Yeah, I was looking into utensils for my wife's uncle who has familial tremors. It's not Parkinson's, and yeah, he shakes all the time too. And so we've been looking at stuff like, I think we looked at the Lift. I think there's a company called Levelware or Liftware that does utensils as well.
Liftware.
And Liftware, yeah.
And I think Level is their one for people with cerebral palsy.
Okay.
But we were going to talk about Intuit and QuickBooks, but it's been a great discussion about everything else.
We got sidetracked.
I don't mind. I really don't mind.
That's our modus operandi around here.
I will say that TurboTax in Canada, this year we're in the process of changing the technology powering TurboTax online. It's going to be different this year. I think it's going to be much better. We're basically replacing the older Canadian tax platform with the platform from the United States. It's more modern. It has better use of ARIA, so you'll know when inputs are required. You'll know when they're invalid. Better HTML.
Great.
The Canadian product was great, but it was an old platform. It was ready to be replaced. So I'm going to be up in Canada in the warmest periods. I'm in Edmonton at the end of this month, and then Toronto at the beginning of next month, just to kind of go through and make sure that the TurboTax Online product is solid.
Wait, you're going to be in Edmonton?
When I was up there in September, it looked great. Yeah. I always go up to Edmonton in the dead of winter.
Pack your mittens.
And I was born and raised in Southern California, so the only time I get below freezing is when I visit Edmonton. And
I don't know. I was going to make an Edmonton joke, but no, forget it. It's okay.
They write themselves. No, Ryan's from Red Deer, though.
Okay.
Close
I think
enough.
I've been to Red Deer.
Probably.
Is that where there's a auto museum? Like a tractor and auto museum?
That I'm not sure of.
I'll bet. That sounds about right.
That's sure. Smack dab in the middle between Edmonton and Calgary.
That's right.
So I'm actually
I
not
tend
sure
to
about the
visit
museum.
strange museums.
Yeah.
I think don't they have the gun rack museum in Red Deer?
Oh, do they? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Well, okay. Well, so where can people find Intuit online if they're so interested in one of the software packages?
Intuit.com. It's INTUIT.com.
And is there a place on that website where people, if they have any accessibility questions, can pose them?
I would love to say yes, but we're working on that.
Okay.
We do have it in, I'm sorry, I should say, I'm talking US. It's intuit.ca. Okay. And in intuit.ca, we do have an accessibility statement because of we're completely compliant with AODA.
Excellent.
And there are feedback mechanisms on that page, so you can send us feedback via email.
Well, and I've got your personal email, so I'm going to share it with the world.
One last thing I did want to mention, QuickBooks Self-Employed is a really great application. It's accessible, but essentially if you are self-employed, this is a really good application for, basically it does 4 things. It helps you separate your business and personal expenses. It tracks your mileage, even if you're a passenger in the car. It helps you send invoices, and it tells you how much taxes you owe every quarter, so you can kind of estimate your taxes. I've tried it with people that were deaf-blind. I've tried it with people that were blind. It's a really good application. It's about $10 a month, so it's very reasonable. And if you like it so much the first time you use it, then you can buy it now kind of thing, and it's only $5 a month from what I understand.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thanks again, Ted, for joining us, and thanks for listening. Incidentally, we're not used to actually talking to people who have actually listened to the podcast, so it was a real treat.
I was going to make a joke about this not being the right Ted. I was actually a dentist. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
That's I don't know. Part of me is really surprised at just how big of a component accessibility is to a software company that makes 2 products.
Well, it's nice to see.
It is. It's
super,
incredible.
Super nice to see, and it's nice to hear that, you know, they're not facing it with any kind of, you know, economic metrics saying, you know, oh, you've got to make this much money. Or,
what's our rate of return on this?
Well, and you don't hear of a lot of other products. Like over the years, I've looked at, you know, Sage, Simply Accounting, and there's been nothing that is, you know, really being accessible.
Well, look at our previous life with a different accessibility company. They used Simply Accounting, and I can't tell you how much of a pain in the neck that was to get it running with stuff like JAWS.
Yeah.
They had crap accessibility.
Yep.
So, it is amazing to see. So, you know, and again, that's part of the reason why we reached out and wanted to talk to Ted, not just because we use Quicken. Well, let's give them a plug. We use Quicken.
QuickBooks.
Right?
That's right. QuickBooks.
Oh, sorry.
QuickBooks
We use QuickBooks.
Online. Yeah, and one of the reasons that I picked QuickBooks was because I heard it was accessible, and then of course I picked the one product that they have that wasn't.
Well, and we need to talk about that too, because as Ted mentioned, Do It Blind, is their, I guess, partner who does their JAWS scripting, and we've reached out to them, I think, a couple times, and I'm not sure where that ever ended up. I think they were still working on it, but like anything, the web changes constantly, and this is a work in progress.
But I mean, they've been nothing but helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Simply Accounting, I remember specifically us reaching out to them for accessibility issues, and you just got nothing back.
Yeah, they didn't really know much about accessibility.
Right. So hopefully more companies are starting to take it more seriously. Certainly accessibility these days is much more of a hot topic among developers and among companies than it used to be 10 years ago. But that being said, I don't know I haven't heard of many other software companies that are doing what Intuit is doing. So,
and you got the name right. Well done.
Thank you. I'm professional. I've been looking at these chocolate croissants the entire show.
Yeah, I bring treats down. You guys never eat any of them.
Well,
so,
because we were talking
recording
to Ted.
a podcast.
We're not going to be like Russell.
Yeah, why not? It's not like we're live. You can edit whatever you want.
Munch.
Hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
atbanter.com.
Get me out of here. They can also email us if they so desire, atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
And hey, did you know that we're also on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram?
I did.
Well, okay.
But some of these people who are listening probably don't. Yeah. What is it? I think it's at ATBanter, Facebook, and at AT_banter for our Twitter. All right, that's going to about do it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening in, and we'll see everybody next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.
Whoa, look at that. Master of the one take.